In our headlines on this Friday afternoon, April 21st, here in Capital's Hall. The U.S. reaffirms its defense alliance with South Korea in response to Russia's threat to arm North Korea, as President Yoon throws on the table the hypothetical scenario of arming Ukraine. Seoul's Finance Minister Cho Kyung-ho highlights efforts by the ministry's one-stop export support team in facilitating bureaucratic formalities and further shares plans to offer business consultations to small and medium-sized businesses. And Capital's Hall is currently playing host to the country's annual World IT Show, where urban air mobility is receiving much public attention amid hopes to have taxis flying across Seoul's skies by 2025. The Biden administration has underscored its commitment to South Korea's defense while applauding the latter's humanitarian response to Ukraine's plight. Now, remarks to this end followed media requests for a U.S. response to Russia's recent threat of possibly providing North Korea with lethal weapons. Our Lee Seung-jae has the latest.
Following Moscow's threat to arm North Korea if South Korea sends lethal assistance to Ukraine, National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications John Kirby said Thursday that Washington takes its defense commitment to Seoul very, very seriously, stressing the treaty alliance between the two allies. Kirby also said that the U.S. is grateful for the support that South Korea has already provided for Ukraine, noting that Seoul has provided some $100 million worth of humanitarian aid assistance to Kyiv. He added that South Korea has also been very vocal in supporting Ukraine and speaking out against Russia's aggression. Kirby went on to call South Korea a terrific ally, terrific friend. During the press briefing, he also mentioned the upcoming state visit by President Yoon, in which Kirby said the two leaders will most likely discuss a wide range of issues, including the war in Ukraine. President Yoon, during an exclusive interview with Reuters earlier this week, hinted that Seoul could possibly shift its policy of no lethal weapons assistance to Ukraine. According to Yoon, South Korea may have no option but to provide more than humanitarian assistance to Ukraine if Russia conducts large-scale attacks on civilians. In response, Moscow threatened to supply Pyongyang with weapons and also warned that providing military aid to Ukraine would mean Seoul becoming involved in the conflict to a certain extent. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And a war of words unfolded between Seoul and Beijing back on Thursday amid remarks by President Yoon regarding Taiwan during his interview with Reuters. Our Lee Shi-hoo has more on this diplomatic discord.
South Korea's foreign ministry says it summoned the Chinese ambassador on Thursday to strongly protest Beijing's criticism of South Korean President Yoon's remarks on Taiwan. That's according to First Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs Chang Woo-jin speaking to reporters on the same day. Chang said that China's foreign ministry was guilty of serious diplomatic discourtesy by denouncing Yoon and calling on South Korea to refrain from meddling in Taiwan issues. This move comes as President Yoon, in an interview with Reuters on Wednesday, said tensions in Taiwan occurred due to forceful attempts to change the status quo and voiced opposition to such change. Yoon also stressed that the issue is a global matter that goes beyond China and Taiwan, like the issue of North Korea. Regarding the comment, Beijing's foreign ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin on Thursday said that, quote, the resolution is a matter for Chinese who do not need to be told what should or should not be done, emphasizing that South Korea should not meddle in the matter. Hours after Beijing's comments, South Korea's foreign ministry hit back, saying the comments by the Chinese foreign ministry were unspeakable. Seoul's foreign ministry's Chang Woo-jin said that China should work to prevent unnecessary disturbance in the bilateral relationship between the two countries over the matter. Lee Shi-hoo, Arirang News.
And Seoul has also shared much dismay over Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's sending of a ritual offering to the controversial Yasukuni shrine in Tokyo. Earlier on this Friday, the foreign ministry here called on Tokyo to, quote, face history and to show remorse, genuine remorse that would be for its past deeds. The statement follows Japanese media reports, including that by Kyodo News, which added some 90 Japanese lawmakers had visited the shrine in person to pay their respects amid the two-day spring festival there. The sending of ritual offerings and in-person visits to the Yasukuni shrine by Japanese leaders have prompted much criticism from South Korea as well as neighboring China as the shrine is regionally regarded as a symbol of Japan's past aggression. The site honors Japan's war dead, including 14 Class A war criminals. Over in Sudan, at least 330 people have died and nearly 3,200 have been injured amid brutal confrontations between the army there and a paramilitary force. Now, this is according to the World Health Organization on Thursday. The body has also joined the international community in calling for a ceasefire to allow civilians a safe and sustained humanitarian corridor. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has echoed this call, highlighting the plight of people being trapped in conflict zones without access to basic necessities. Cars and chips are expected to take center stage during broader trade talks between South Korea and the U.S. in Washington, D.C. next week. Now, that being said, our trade correspondent Shin Ha-young touches upon the issues with regard to electric vehicles in light of the Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act.
The U.S. Inflation Reduction Act has emerged as one of the key agenda items for the South Korea-U.S. summit. Earlier this week, under the final assembly requirements in North America, the U.S. shortened its list of EV models eligible for tax incentives. South Korean auto giants Hyundai and Kia were both left out. This leaves huge concerns over South Korean companies, as their U.S. counterparts will have a head start in the global EV market. But one expert says this could be seen as an opportunity.
It's a good chance for South Korea, as global automakers now have to compete only based on the quality of their products. We have an advantage over global competitors, as South Korean electric cars have been recognized by the global market, with winning 3 awards this year.
South Korean EV battery makers will also be paying attention to the summit, with concerns that they would have to change their current manufacturing processes. The uncertainty has been substantially relieved as a subsidy of $3,750 is given when more than 40% of the key minerals are either mined or processed in the U.S. or FTA countries, which South Korea is part of. But there are still some uncertainties.
Since we don't have enough resources, we can't extract the major minerals for battery production. The latest requirements imply that even if South Korea processes those minerals, it can still qualify for tax credits. However, uncertainty still lingers as the details of tax incentives for automakers have not been announced yet.
With remaining uncertainties in mind, the government may convey its concern and stance during the summit with President Biden.
It is important to secure a time extension until South Korea can reduce its dependence on Chinese minerals for batteries. It would also be great if the government could convey that there is a contradiction between the Inflation Reduction Act and the Free Trade Agreement, as it could amount to discrimination against a product manufactured outside the U.S.
Meanwhile, more than 100 business leaders will be accompanying President Yoon next week for his trip to the U.S. And Presidential Secretary for Economic Affairs hinted at the possibility of addressing the Inflation Reduction Act if the two leaders feel the need for comprehensive cooperation measures. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
And yet another issue that looks to be addressed is related to chips, as I mentioned earlier. Amid the U.S.'s recent CHIPS Act, our Moon Hae-ryun has details.
The future of the chip industry is going to be made in America.
During next week's bilateral summit between the leaders of South Korea and the U.S., discussions on Washington's CHIPS and Science Act are expected to take place in order to address some of its rules and uncertainties for South Korean chip makers. The act was signed into law in August last year as part of President Biden's plan to foster semiconductor production and research in the United States, after disruption in the supply chain during COVID-19 left the production of electronic goods dwindling and costs rising. The bill provides $39 billion towards funding manufacturing incentives. And according to the U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, as of last week, more than 200 companies have expressed their interest in grants. Currently, 3/4 of global semiconductor production takes place in East Asia. Samsung Electronics dominates the market share for DRAM chips, followed by SK Hynix. And according to market research company TrendForce, The two companies combined had a market share of 72.8% in DRAM sales. With the grant and loans available through the CHIPS Act, Samsung Electronics could cover up to $5.95 billion of its $17 billion investment in building its Texas plant. So what's stopping them from applying? The Korea Economic Research Institute published a report last Friday to highlight 4 rules from the CHIPS and Science Act that would need to be addressed. Of these, the greatest issue would be the limitation on the expansion and new construction of facilities in countries of concern listed by the US, China in particular. Nearly half of DRAM chips from SK Hynix and 40% of flash memory chips from Samsung Electronics are produced in China.
Of course, the semiconductor market will grow bigger in the future, and companies would have had plans to increase production capacity in their facilities in China as a result. So it's true that there are now restrictions preventing that.
Another area of concern is the 1-year reprieve on export restrictions on semiconductor machinery to China, as it is due to expire in October this year. Whether these issues can be resolved with a satisfactory conclusion for both parties during the summit remains to be seen. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
As part of efforts to boost exports, Seoul's Finance Ministry has had in place a one-stop export support team since early this year to facilitate bureaucratic procedures. Well, the ministry is now looking to expand the scope of its support. Our Lee Soo-jin reports.
The South Korean government is upping its efforts to increase exports. Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho announced during an emergency economic meeting on Friday that the ministry's one-stop export support team had solved 320 cases out of the 402 export issues that were filed. The government launched the Pan-Governmental Support Team under the Finance Ministry in February to address problems related to exports. Issues related to logistics, customs, and marketing made up around 60% of the cases filed. The country's exports have been on a downward trend from last October.
Although the Korean economy has seen a slowdown in inflation and a moderate recovery in domestic demand, exports and facility investment have remained sluggish due to external uncertainties.
Data from the Korea Customs Service shows that exports are expected to remain sluggish this month as well, dropping 11% on year during the first 20 days of April. This brings the trade deficit this year to more than $26 billion, which is already more than half of last year's record deficit. The one-stop export support team also offers services such as helping logistics companies expand their facilities, as well as speeding up export procedures. The government is planning to expand services available by offering one-on-one counseling services for small and medium-sized companies starting in early May and adding a portal on the One-Stop Export Support website in June to allow companies to file their trade-related issues online. To address falling semiconductor exports, one of the main drivers of the ballooning trade deficit, the government plans to offer tax breaks of up to 28% for SMEs that invest in facilities this year. Semiconductor exports plunged nearly 40% on year during the first 20 days of April. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Also on the local front, wholesale prices have risen for the 3rd month in a row. According to the Bank of Korea on this Friday, the producer price index in March rose 0.1% on month, with chemical and hospitality industries leading the rise. In contrast, agricultural and energy industries noted retreats. Yet on an annual basis, overall producer prices were up 3.3%. Meanwhile, despite annual inflation remaining high, the annualized rate of price increases has been slowing for 9 straight months. The phrases half portion and small spending have been trending on local social media platforms as people here seek to better respond to the high cost of living. Our Yoon-Jin explains.
This is a snack bar in Seoul. What's unique on this menu is a half serving of tteokbokki. This idea of a half portion was first added 2 years ago, and so far, customers seem satisfied.
The small serving allows me to try different things.
More people looking for such half portions has helped sales for this snack bar. Now, this is a zero-waste store, where their motto of not producing waste has been attracting customers. This store allows customers to only buy as much as they need, with products ranging from shampoo, detergent, and soaps to food items like pasta and condiments. As disposable containers are not used, the store can keep prices low.
Buying 300 grams of shampoo at the refill station is around 40% cheaper than when buying the whole product.
Such refill stations are seeing high demand, particularly among young people living alone. Small spending not only reduces waste, but it also lessens the burden of the cost of living. The option to buy smaller amounts also gives customers the benefit of trying a wider variety of selections. This latest trend addresses both issues of inflation and environmental pollution.
A big factor contributing to this trend is the worsening economic hardship, but it is also closely related to more awareness and interest in environmental protection.
The trend of small consumption and small spending is helping reduce waste. But the growing demand for such smaller portions also suggests that people are suffering from soaring prices. 이은진, Arirang News.
Today, that is April 21st, Korea celebrates Science Day. And in line with this occasion, Seoul is currently hosting the country's annual World IT Show. Our Kim Jung-sil was there.
This year's World IT Show presented some of the most talked about state-of-the-art technologies like this urban air mobility, or UAM, that could be used as a flying taxi in the future. The aircraft is being developed by South Korean telecommunication service provider SK Telecom and America's Joby Aviation as part of an exclusive partnership. SK Telecom will be in charge of connecting the aircraft's network.
Behind me are visitors trying out the demo ride experience. This UAM aircraft hopes to fly across the Seoul sky by 2025.
Many lined up to experience this transportation of the future.
I thought this can help shorten transport times and solve traffic congestion issues. I also thought it would be useful in the future if the technology can be adapted to real life.
In a booth nearby, Samsung's Galaxy S23 mobile phone proudly showcased its eco-friendly technology of using discarded fishing nets to make some of the inner parts of the phone. Hyundai Motor's latest update to its electric vehicle, Kona, on the other hand, focused on making its automobile more like a home. The car can apparently provide electricity to home appliances such as this fridge, monitor, and laptop computer for up to 4 days. But this year's World IT Show wasn't just about big conglomerates. It also gave a platform to startups as well. A 4-year-old startup, gov't, for example, has already won 3 CES Innovation Awards with its technology to visualize and track warehouse storage.
There are hundreds of thousands of shelves in a warehouse, so it takes a long time to find where anything is. But with our digital twin technology, it's easier and faster for workers to find where things are.
All the companies we spoke to said they hope their technologies can change the lives of people not just in South Korea, but in the world. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In the United States, SpaceX's Starship, its most powerful ever rocket, exploded in mid-air on its maiden test flight. The 33-engine rocket suffered what SpaceX called a, quote, rapid unscheduled disassembly, about 4 minutes into its flight. Starship had blasted off from a launch pad in South Texas at around 9:30 a.m. local time. About 2.5 minutes into the flight, its heavy rocket booster failed to separate, causing the rocket to spiral out of control. This triggered onboard detonations that destroyed the rocket. Despite its failure to reach orbit, SpaceX engineers called the launch a success. It allowed them to gather large amounts of data to be used in the next launch attempt within a few months. The Starship is SpaceX's next-generation launch system. It's designed to take humans and cargo to Earth orbit, the Moon, and Mars. Looking to Twitter, where thousands of celebrities and other influential figures, from Beyoncé to the Pope, are losing their verified status. Starting on Thursday, the iconic blue tick has been removed from accounts without a paid subscription. Individuals wanting to keep or gain a blue tick need to pay $8 per month, while organizations need to pay $1,000 for a gold verification mark. The platform has undergone a series of changes since Elon Musk bought the company in October last year. Some changes include restricting voting on Twitter polls to users with a verified account, and only those with paid Twitter accounts will have their tweets featured on the recommended For You page. Lawyers for Hollywood actor Alec Baldwin said on Thursday that criminal charges against him over the fatal shooting of a cinematographer have been dropped. The involuntary manslaughter charges followed the death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins, who was killed after Baldwin fired a live round from a prop gun on the Rust movie set in New Mexico in October 2021. Baldwin has maintained that he was unaware that the gun contained a live round. A film armorer, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, faces the same charges, which her lawyers expect to be dropped soon. The announcement comes less than 2 weeks before the trial was due to start. Filming of the movie resumed on the same day. And finally, thousands of people gathered near the remote west coast Australian town of Exmouth on Thursday local time to catch a rare solar eclipse. It lasted 62 seconds and created a 40-kilometer wide shadow. The eclipse was a rare hybrid type that has not been seen since 2013. Such eclipses create what looks like a ring of fire when the moon moves in front of the sun, which then turns into a total solar eclipse when the sun's light is completely blocked. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Summer-like warmth in the south came to an end. Temperatures all returning to what we would normally have around this time under sunny skies in most parts of the country. So we could have been expecting perfect late spring weather if only yellow dust hadn't blown into the country. Yellow dust is gradually covering the nation. This time, eastern parts of the country are forecast to be covered with very bad levels of yellow dust today and into tomorrow. It's going to be a dusty Saturday in most parts of the country, so if you're planning any outdoor activities, a face mask is a must. East Coast regions are having a relatively cooler afternoon. Highs hovering in the mid to upper teens along with easterly winds. Meanwhile, 전라남도 and Gwangju could see some spotty rain between late this afternoon into this evening. Looking ahead, wide temperature differences between lows and highs to continue, while cooler air moves in next Tuesday with nationwide rain in the forecast. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That ends our Friday afternoon newscast, but we'll return with our panel session in a few minutes, so do stay with us. Thank you for now.
Lotus Lantern Festival. Let the festival begin. We desire to share Korea's proud culture with the world. So that people can have a time of healing just by watching and become happy as they enjoy the festival. So that joy can stay in their hearts the moment they encounter our festival. That is the reason we want to share our culture with the world. Welcome to Lotus Lantern Festival, Seoul, Korea.
Filmmaker Anthony Shim's Rice Boy Sleeps has been garnering rave reviews for its poignant portrayal of the universal desire for belonging through the story of a Korean widow striving to start a new life in Canada in the 1990s with her son. So what was the inspiration behind this feature film? What is the global appeal of Rice Boy Sleeps? And what is the director's response to the host of critical acclaim regarding his talent in telling stories and technically portraying them on screen?
Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Today, we turn to the big screen for a talk with the director of the movie Rice Boy Sleeps that has been receiving quite a bit of attention. I have Anthony Shim here in the studio with me. Director Shim, Anthony, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Right then, let's begin then with a synopsis of your feature film, Rice Boy Sleeps.
Rice Boy Sleeps is a feature film about a Korean mother and son who moved from Korea to Canada in the 90s, and it follows their journey of acclimating to their new lives, and then due to unfortunate circumstances, they return back home for the first time.
Back home would be here in South Korea.
Back home, Korea, yeah.
I understand the movie was inspired largely by your own experience in Canada. How personal is this particular film?
It's very personal, but you know, the things that are based on my own life, although you know there are certain events and sort of plot points in the film that are based on my own experiences, but I would say primarily the influence is the emotional journey of the young boy as he becomes a young man, and his struggles with his identity as a Korean Canadian person in the 90s especially, and his relationship with his mom over the years. I mean, it's that overall arc, that emotional arc that I would say is inspired by my own experiences.
You moved to Canada in the 1990s as well then?
I did, yeah.
Assuming. I see. Director Shim, Anthony, I understand that you wrote, you cast, you directed, you acted and you edited this particular screen production. I'm sure every single task had its own challenge, but what would you say was the toughest?
I mean, the acting part was hard because you know, the thing I love most about acting is to be able to, you know, trust a director and to be fully present with other actors. But because I had to wear both hats, you know, a part of my brain was always, you know, like, you know, as a director, it never fully left. So that part was tricky, but I would still say the toughest part was the writing, because it was such a solitary process, and it's really hard to gauge or know if a film that is inspired, you know, loosely based on my own life would at all be interesting to anyone else in the world than me.
I see what you mean. And that being said, how long did it take you to write the story?
Well, I mean, the actual writing process was very fast. It only took 3-4 months. You know, I did several drafts, but I do feel like, you know, I've been sort of unofficially, indirectly working on this script, this film, for many years. You know, accumulating ideas and characters in my head or in other forms for a long time. And it really was like when I sat down to really write this film, you know, it took a few months.
I understand that you worked with a cast that, with many of them, that is, being first-time actors. Is that right? Was there a challenge with that?
I would say there really wasn't any more challenge than there would be working with experienced actors. And I think when an actor is right for the part, when the casting is well done, it's it's just so effortless and so fun. You know, like even if the actor's got 30 years of experience, if that person's not right for the part, it's you know, it's a tough process. But you know, because our actors were so right, the chemistry was so good, we connected as people first and foremost. That it was so wonderful and fun and enjoyable all the way through.
Right. Anthony, Rice Boy Sleeps has been sweeping global film awards after screening at many film festivals. I understand you have 27 awards thus far. What would you say was or is the global appeal of your film Rice Boy Sleeps?
I mean, we can't know for certain, but I would say based on a lot of the feedback that I've received, a lot of the conversations that I've had, I would have to say that it's to do with the mother and son relationship. It's in-depth, specific, honest portrayal of that relationship and the dynamic, I think, is what's so relatable to a lot of people. Even to those who aren't Korean or who aren't immigrants. I think most people can watch it and relate to the feelings that, you know, a parent has for their child or a child has for their parents. So, I mean, that would be my best guess.
And again, then, this is an impromptu question. Does the relationship between the boy and the mother in your film perhaps reflect the relationship between you and your mother as well?
I would say so. I mean, I think it's impossible to not have my real relationship with my mother, you know, bleed into the story. You know, I wouldn't say it's exact. By no means is this an autobiography or a biopic, but I think it's colored with a lot of the real relationship and the struggles and the beautiful moments that I've had with my own mother. So.
Right, I see. I understand, Anthony, that you were very scared. You were petrified, according to one media report, to screen Rice Boy Sleeps at Busan International Film Festival. Could you explain your feelings for us?
Well, I mean, a lot of the fears early on was that I was afraid that perhaps because the story is so specific and unique to the Korean-Canadian experience, that I feared that perhaps the others, that we were isolating other audience members. And the reason why I was so scared of the Korean audience was because it just meant more to me. You know, if a certain country or a certain demographic, you know, can't really connect to the film, you know, it's okay. I can live with that. It's not for everyone. But in particular, the Korean audiences, you know, and their opinions really did matter to me. And we had no way of knowing whether it would work or not. And so just leading up to that first screening, I was fully prepared for the possibility that audiences completely rejected.
I understand that the silence that followed the screening of your film back then and in Busan actually shocked you. Could you explain that for us as well?
Oh, yeah. I mean, typically in North America, you know, a film will end, and when the credits start, and if the audience enjoyed the film, they'll, you know, respond with applause immediately at the credits. What I didn't know is that in Korea, typically I hear that the audiences will wait till the credits have ended before the applause, because people here consider the credits as to be a part of the movie, which I think is great, and I think that's the way it should be. But not knowing that, and already being so nervous about the screening, you know, my producing team and I, you know, we all sat there looking around going, oh my God, this is a disaster.
How did you know it wasn't the case, though? How did you know they liked it?
It wasn't until we got up on stage to do the Q&A and we could see people's faces.
That must have been nerve-wracking.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We're going, like, why aren't people even, like, pretending to like it? Why is it just complete silence?
Were you as nervous when you were screening in Canada?
Yeah. Less so. Because the difference was that in Canada, I mean, our first screening in Toronto was pretty nerve-wracking, but we had so many friends and family there. You know, a lot of our cast was there, a lot of our crew was there, so it kind of felt like, regardless of what audiences think, like, we are here together.
Home ground.
Yeah, and it's, you know, we're experiencing this moment as a group, and it was just such a joyous, exciting moment. But Korea, we're in foreign territory in a way. So
right, in a way. Anthony, Rice Boy Sleeps has been compared to the 2020 American film Minari. They share subject matter, according to one critic. And that being said, what are your personal thoughts regarding the similarities as well as differences between these two acclaimed productions?
Well, I mean, I knew that there would be comparisons from day one. I knew it was unavoidable. And I still remember when it was while I was writing the script that Minari premiered at Sundance Film Festival and won all of its awards, and that's when it kind of, you know, surfaced as this like new great film about the Korean immigrant experience, and I thought I thought it was over for me. I thought I would have to scrap this film, but luckily, I had
What kept you going? Because they're so similar if you think about it, like just roughly from the surface.
Yeah. On the surface, there's a lot of similarities, but I kept going because, well, I had some friends who had seen the film and also read my script and said, oh, you're exploring completely different territories. That aside from the obvious comparisons that, I was assured by some friends that this would be okay if done well. And also, I just felt like if I could be as personal and honest and specific as I could be, then it would find its own pathway. But nonetheless, I knew the comparisons would be unavoidable and inevitable. And how do I feel about the comparison? It depends on how it's being compared to. You know, if it's being compared to in the sense of, it's another film that showcases Korean American talent or Korean Canadian talent, and it's a film that is, could do as well or is being regarded in that same category. I mean, that's an honor. I mean,
right, because Minari won like about 6 Academy Award nominations, was it?
Yeah, and it won like 8 million awards, and it put certain actors, certain names on the map in Hollywood. It achieved things that no other films about that subject matter had ever achieved. So to be compared to it in that positive light, it's an honor, and I'll take that comparison any day. But when it is being compared to in the way of, in a negative sense of like, well, this one's better, for these reasons, or, we already saw a film about Korean immigrants, why do we need to see another one? Or when it starts to get into that territory, then it does feel not so pleasant, because I do truly believe that, aside from the obvious similarities, the two films are exploring very different things. And I think so much of the comparison has happened because there are such a small number of films about the Korean immigrant experience. I mean, if there's a film about, let's say, the Italian immigrant experience or in America, like, we don't start comparing it to The Godfather. We as an audience, we just see it as its own entity and judge it on its own merit. I just don't think we're there yet with Korean films or even Asian American films, just because there's still such a small number of them. And I think, and I'm optimistic that as time goes on, there's going to be more and more great, high quality TV shows and films about Asian people living in, foreign countries. That
hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, even since our films come out, there's been a handful of new films and shows that have come out that are doing like so great.
It's a valid point.
Yeah, and so I think 5 years from now, I think it'll just be one of so many, and we'll stop comparing them based on the obvious similarities, but compare them on its own merits as a story and for its technical achievements.
Right. Anthony, actress Choi Seung-yoon plays the main character So-young. What essentially are you perhaps seeking to share through her character?
I mean, first and foremost, when I first started writing this character, it was the most important thing for me was to portray a young Korean and also Asian woman in the way that I felt was familiar to me. for so long, especially in Hollywood, you see the way Asian women have been portrayed, and it's, the stereotypes. It's the quiet, meek, subservient sort of roles, or it's like extreme, kung fu, it's like superhero types. And there's, I felt like there's been a real lack of portrayals of Asian women in particular that, that I felt was representative of the women that I've grown up around. And so I wanted to make sure that that this role was portrayed in a way that it could allow, Korean women in Canada and America to be able to see and feel like, yes, like that's person, yeah, has captured something that is honest about my experience or our community. And so, yeah, it's just really about showing all sides, that, having multi-dimensions to a person, which oftentimes is really lacking. So, I didn't want to make her into some kind of superhero, some like super mom that is invincible or can do no wrong, but I wanted to make a beautifully flawed human being.
That we can all relate to.
Absolutely.
I see where you're coming from. Anthony, critics claim that your film, it's as impressive in its technical approach as it is in its storytelling. How do you respond to this?
I mean, it's great, especially considering that, I never went to film school. I never learned these things in an official setting. So it's nice to know that I'm not just a hack of a filmmaker, but that, there are things that we're doing that's good.
So your academic background had nothing to do with filmmaking?
No.
That's interesting. You ventured into this as a novice then?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't call myself a novice. I mean, I
apologize.
I spent a great deal of time, the majority of my life, working with actors and working on theater productions. And because I've been an actor myself, I've spent a lot of time on film and TV sets. I'm an avid photographer. Like, I enjoy photography and I enjoy editing. Not as a profession, but I've just had an interest in all of these things. And because of the time I'd spent working with actors and on plays, I realized that over time I had developed and I had, garnered a certain amount of knowledge and skill in a specific area, which then I wanted to, put into my filmmaking. And the technical aspect of filmmaking, I think the fact that I didn't go to film school, perhaps there's a certain amount of ignorance
that allows you to try out new angles
and question things, that are the norm. And so much of that credit has to go to our actual crew and team, those who are professionals in their field, like our cinematographer, Chris Liu. Like, we collaborated in figuring out and creating the look and the flow and the feel of the movie, but I mean, it would be wrong for me to start just taking all the credit, because he is the director of the photography in this film, and the same thing goes to the lighting team, the wardrobe team. I mean, they all are so good at what they do that the credit does have to be.
I'm sure spread. You had a remarkable team then.
We did. I really couldn't have asked for a better team.
Right. Beyond your film, Anthony, what do you suppose are the broader implications of the recent acclaim that Korean movies, music, and dramas have been garnering on the global stage? What are the implications of that on perhaps the overall perception of Korean immigrants?
I'm not sure.
Is it something we're still exploring then?
I feel like we're in that stage where that transition is happening. Like, I just don't know where this is all going to land eventually. But it's exciting. It's a really cool time. Thinking back on where things were at, what it was like to be a Korean person living abroad 20 years ago, compared to now. It's the progress we've made, the changes that have happened, the hunger and the desire and the curiosity for Korea, everything is very interesting. But I think we will eventually find a middle ground where it's not, people start to recognize that it's not all just K-pop and, you know, there's other music that's Korean that is also great.
Right, pansori.
Yeah, I want to be optimistic and think that the popularity of K-pop and certain K-drama or even food, that allows people to become interested and eventually start exploring other parts of Korea as well, like more traditional things. You know, like even with music, yeah, like other types of music that exist in this country.
Right.
Same thing with film. You know, it's like that's the one thing that I'm really the most passionate about. I hope that people, you know, people's curiosity and love for certain Korean films and shows allow people to stay open-minded and want to explore other Korean films of the past and the present.
And talking about exploring, what words of advice would you like to share with those perhaps who are thinking about entering the filmmaking industry as we speak?
It's a tough road ahead. You know, I understand why people discouraged me from entering this industry. They were all correct. The warnings were all accurate.
What was the
valid.
warning that resonated the most with you?
I mean, the most common thing you'll hear is, you know, how hard it is to make a living, you know, and the rejections, the amount of rejection that you have to face.
And this is something you face as well then, in your process? It seems like your entry into the film industry was applauded. You won an award with your second film. I understand your first one was
rejected from 70 festivals.
Daughter, right?
Yeah, and I have 20 years of rejections.
I personally liked it though.
You watched?
Yes.
Like first film?
I looked it up because after we got an okay from you to join our show, I looked up the movie and I thought it was quite okay.
Where did you watch it?
I have my sources
here
and there.
That's impressive.
Right.
You know, and that was like such a great learning experience, but it also was faced with a lot of rejection, and that was a huge motivation. But you know, I was an actor for 20 years, and I've probably been rejected from thousands and thousands of auditions, and that does take a toll on a person's psyche and a person's confidence after a while. And same thing with the film industry. I mean, we got so lucky. This film, you know, we did everything. I did everything I could, and controlled everything I could in making the best film possible. But there is no recipe to any of this. It's, you know, you do the best you can and you hope for the best. And you really do have to hope, because there's so many things that turned out well for us that was just good fortune.
Right.
You know, good timing. You know, there's so many films that, you know, struggled or suffered as a result of COVID, for example. You know, the fact that we were able to kind of maneuver around all those challenges, I mean, it's good fortune.
Right.
And
some things just go beyond our control.
Yeah, and so, but you know, my advice to anyone who does want to enter this field is that if you really love what you do, if you love it so much that you'll do it, you know, for no money, for no recognition, no accolade, if none of that stuff matters to you, and if you would do it for the rest of your life because you love it, then do it, and don't really give a damn what anyone says, and never apologize for doing what you love.
Right, and on that note, we'll end today then. Director Anthony Shim, thank you so much for making time to join us live today.
Thank you for having me.
Right, well, for those of you who have yet to make plans for the weekend, do check out Rice Boys Sleeps, currently playing at theatres nationwide. Thank you for watching. Have a good weekend. See you next Monday.